Hello, I'm Mandi McLeod. Welcome to Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Furrow. Coming up in the show, Yvonne the elusive cow is being sought after her escape into the Bavarian woods 3 months ago. Cow whisperers and heat tracking devices have all failed in their efforts. We ask why all the fuss and expense in an economy gone mad. Potato and tomato growers battle for psyllid, a tiny flying insect with voracious breeding habits and a double whammy effect on plants. The pest feeds off the plants and infects them with a nasty bacteria. What options do we have to control it? And rural contractors plead for understanding as work hours regulations add unnecessary angst to those battling to beat the weather. Joining me today is agricultural consultant from Ferguson Lockwood and Associates, John Sweeney, and BNZ's agribusiness sector partner, John Janssen. Welcome. Now, Yvonne, this beef cow who's escaped slaughter and has been hiding out in the Bavarian woods for the last 3 months is causing such a furore that heat-seeking devices, a cow whisperer and an animal tracker from Africa have all been brought in to try and find this elusive bovine. John Sweeney, how bizarre do you think this story is, given that there are many thousands of euro being spent on trying to find one cattle beast?
Brings back to me memories of buying our farm at Martangi when the deer escaped from the neighbour's property into an 80-hectare block of maize. All the farmer did was open the fence up and the deer returned that night. So maybe this cow's got some heat tracking device on it or something that, the farmer's probably got it back and he's made a lot of money out of it or something.
Oh, you think she's not? Well, apparently the cow whisperer has spoken to Yvonne. And Yvonne said she realises she's done nothing wrong, but she's just a little scared to come out. John, I guess I just want to know, when we've got a financial recession and Europe is suffering as much as any country, how there can be a €10,000 reward put up for the capture of this cow?
Yeah, I think the answer's in the coverage it's been getting, isn't it? I mean, if you're I see one of the people that's offering the reward as a news station, and things like this psychic onto it just keeps the story going. It's been going for 3 months, getting a lot more coverage. Maybe they find it, maybe they don't. So the $10,000 they've put up as a reward is probably great. That's great value for them. $10 doesn't buy you much advertising on TV. So I think there's probably an element to that. But I think also this whole fugitive, people like to it's like Mandi McLeod sort of thing, isn't it? People like to follow a story and soft news and an element in a recession's, people are probably after something a bit less serious.
So you think I'm just being a crazy old cynic when I look at this and I just think, oh, how ridiculous. What extra could we do with that 10,000 euros? I'm a cynic. Fair enough. We'll go with that. Hey, now this week Fonterra have announced that they're cutting back on organics. They want to halve their collection area. Good news, bad news? Realistic news?
Oh, I think it's the cold, hard reality of organics in a recessionary environment. It's always been the case that if you've got a shelf full of product and 10% of it's organic and 90%'s 50% cheaper, when things are going really well, people buy the organics. They like to think they can do that sort of thing, but when they haven't got the money, then they go back to the cheaper product. That's just economics.
I think the company's trying to make money out of the business. They've got to restructure their way of doing the business, haven't they?
When I was doing the research for the show, and before Fonterra had made this announcement, I came across an article from Europe, and they were saying that the sales of organic products have definitely decreased with the global recession. But there were more farmers looking to get into organics, particularly in the beef area. So I found that quite interesting, that coming hard on the heels of that, Fonterra had made that decision, and then Soil and Health Society come out and basically start saying that there's a conspiracy theory going on.
Yeah, probably unlikely. It's important though, because there is that groundswell of people wanting to get into organics, and it's a great story, and it's certainly a niche market New Zealand can operate well in. So as far as Fonterra's actions, it's important that they pull back and maintain the viability of that industry, so we can grow it again in the future when things do get on the upward swing.
Now, Straight Furrow, reported rural contractors are asking for, I guess, some leniency and maybe even a little bit of sanity when it comes to hours of work, because if they take their regulated breaks at a set time, it really disrupts their ability to get their job done, especially when they're trying to beat the weather.
Sure.
John Sweeney, do you think this is an absolute no-brainer Or is it a case potentially of some unscrupulous contractors working their people inappropriately and ruining it for all?
No, I think it's another rule that's come out, and it's going to be tough on agricultural contractors because they're going to have to find more staff to run their businesses, aren't they? I think they're allowed 14 hours of time, and they've got to knock off, and they've got to keep strict logbooks on that. Now, what that means is, have we got the skilled operators to run the contracting businesses? That's the worry I see in the business. And farmers rely on contractors heavily at a time when they might have had 3 or 4 days of rain. They've got a harvest to do the next day, and everybody wants them at once. Are they going to be able to front up and do the job? It's a tough call on the contracting businesses. I'm sure of that. That's my read of it, anyway.
Yeah. No, it just sort of seemed to me that when you look at the nature of contracting, they're always having to stop to get to fuel up. There are lots of breaks. They may just not be regulated.
No, those breaks are going to be counted in their when they're waiting. That's part of their time on, I understand. And there's nothing they can do about it. That's
right. Moving a little bit potentially back towards organics, Facilid, which is this bug that's been around, I think, for quite some years, which attacks the Solanaceae plants, tomatoes, potatoes, nightshade, tamarillos even, I believe. They've tried 12 different herbicides to try and control this plant. They're now bringing in some, I guess, biological controls. Do you think the fact that we've tried these 12 insecticides before we've gone down a biological control says something about the way we're trying to manage our farms?
It's a bit like the obviously kiwifruit with the PSA as well. You there's two things. You try to keep these things out as long as possible. When they hit, you try to come up with a variety of methods to deal with them, which is where we're at with the Facilid now. And then long term, you look to selective breeding to breed in the resistance to those sorts of those creatures. And it's just about how quickly you can do that. So really, the second stage of spraying is really to buy time for the third stage, which is a permanent solution.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be, because Facilid apparently has been around for quite a while offshore, and it's been here for what I believe is almost 10 years, and yet they don't seem to be any closer to coming up with any solution. I think mainly around the fact that Facilid breeds, every 30 days there's thousands more eggs that come out. So it kind of makes you wonder, are we putting enough money into research? Is it being prioritised enough?
Well, that's what I was going to suggest, that we probably aren't. I mean, we're lacking funding into that area, aren't we? Because, if you're paying a $2,000 hectare cost for leasing these lands to grow all the crops and we've got big contractors around this country, Ball Brothers, Chapmans, Wilcoxes, they're big operators, huge. And those guys know farming, I know that. And I'm sure they must be feeling the effects of this, but I think a lot of them have got good farm practices in place with their crop rotations to avoid the disease and that. And there are guidelines there for them, but as you say, where's the research?
Yeah,
where's the backing to it?
The Wilcox were interesting because they talked about the fact that they've actually planted less area.
Right.
And I mean, this is something that's cost millions of dollars to the industry, and probably one thing that really struck me the most is, why are we only just hearing about it now?
There was a bit of coverage early on with the stripy chips, that was made news for a couple of days or a day.
Yeah, because that's the problem, isn't it? It doesn't apart from the crop damage, the bacteria causes zebra chips.
That's right. Maybe they were concerned about the market impacts of that, and so they sort of kept the story down low, for want of a better term.
Coming up after the break, as Asian consumers eat their way up the food chain, pundits have their money on farmland as a safe haven for funds. So why are foreign investors seeing value in New Zealand dairy farms? An arcane and outdated tax which raises very little revenue has been repealed thanks to federated farmers. What will the abolishment of gift duty do for prospective farmers? Forget the financial bubble, forget the food bubble, focus on the irrigation bubble, says Gwyn Dwyer, editor of the Otago Daily Times. We look at why this has got her so concerned for our future. All this when we return. Welcome back to Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Furrow. In an editorial written for the Otago Daily Times, editor Gwyn Dwyer fears our day of reckoning is coming with respect to irrigation water. She believes that many countries are now nearing the bottom of the barrel, with places like Israel banning the irrigation of wheat in 2000 to ensure enough water for its people to drink. John, do you think there's cause for alarm with what she's written? Do we really need to look at our underwater reservoirs with the same level of concern that she is?
Absolutely we do. Look, New Zealand's in a very, very strong situation around its water resources and our ability to use those to produce food for the world. Her comments around places like India and China and Middle East, they're absolutely valid. The rubber really meets the road on this issue around water and the exportation of water through food, and that's New Zealand's really strongly placed around obviously places like Canterbury where they are pumping from underground aquifers. Management of those resources is critical for us.
John Sweeney, do you think we are managing those underwater resources, for example, in the likes of Canterbury, well enough?
Well, I'm not familiar with the Canterbury scene, Mandy, to be honest, but what I've read and learning about the way they're putting this big project together, harnessing the water as it runs from the high country down to the sea and using it wisely, I think that's great. It's got to be a good thing, hasn't it?
I guess when you read what Gwyn is talking about, is there a potential that we could end up like India, exporting water from Canterbury?
Look, we can't afford to even get close to where Australia are at with their irrigation problems, and there's no need for us to. Capturing the runoff out of the Alps and dam systems, that's sustainable. And there's plenty of that water, and that's the way to go, and that's the way that we are going.
So we need to manage it.
We do. I guess that's my concern, is whether we're actually looking enough at reports from people like Gwyn and taking what she's got to say seriously, or taking our water resource for granted.
Sure.
That's probably the biggest one when you see places like Saudi that have stopped growing wheat just to ensure that they don't run out of potable water. Federated Farmers have just announced their role in repealing the gift duty. It was also reported in Country 99 News. Do you think that this is going to make a really big difference, John Janssen, when it comes to helping business continuation?
I mean, no, I don't think so. It takes out a transaction cost, I guess. And the thing with structures and succession is they're an outcome.
Yes.
They're an outcome of a successful plan. They're not a means to an end in themselves. It makes it simpler. You can't. It gets over the whole transferring only 27,000 each a year thing. So you can, once you've decided on the appropriate structure, you can put that in place immediately, which is to have loans back and things like that. But I don't think it will affect the fundamental issues around farm succession in New Zealand. No.
What do you think, John? Is it? What
Yeah,
are you seeing out there? People really excited about it, or?
Yeah, no, I think it's horses for courses. Every farm situation or ownership structure is going to be different. The best advice I give people is to go and talk to their lawyer and their accountant and get the right advice, because it's important, isn't it? I mean, you're dealing with, in some cases, $10 or $15 million assets here and there, so it's a lot of money, and
Huge
it
amount
needs
of
to be handled
Yes.
carefully, and that's the key thing. Yeah.
So basically, given that Australia abolished their gift duty quite some years ago, you don't think that this has really held us back as a country from transferring family businesses between generations?
No, I don't think. And if you look at Australia, they've got very similar issues around intergenerational farming that we do.
Yes. Yeah. Appropriate processes. Okay, savvy business investors. They're trying to look at land to bank their future. They're moving away from shares. And they're not just really looking at any old land. A lot of them are eyeing up New Zealand land. They're looking for, I guess, what's been undervalued, under-resourced, under-producing land to buy up. Do you think that this is going to have an impact on land prices in New Zealand going forward, given that we're at an all-time record low? And John, you've got some figures on this, haven't you?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I've got figures on the Waikato where I work and live, and we've seen land prices come down in the last 15 years to around about 35, 36 grand a hectare, when they were up around 50 grand a hectare about 3 or 4 years ago. And in that time, we saw some higher sales. This is average prices I'm talking, not the highest prices. The effect of investing, the investor market, may cause farm prices to rise. I can't predict that. I'd hope to think that it would stay down, so that the businesses that invest in these farms get a higher return. Well, that's what my thoughts are. But I mean, we've seen that we haven't seen that, have we? Over time, land always tends to track up.
Do you think we're seeing a change now, John? I mean, what's BNZ looking at with this?
Look, we're hopeful that the industry moves to a more sustainable mix between cash return and capital appreciation in farmland. And and back to a situation where the capital and appreciation of farmland comes from an increase in productivity and product prices internationally. You know, if those two things are linked together, it's that's what's good for the industry. It's interesting to me. You know, we talk about foreign investors and, you know, and whether they're going to shut out people from buying farms. You know, we were perfectly happy to buy all the farms we could get our hands on at 2% return on asset. Now that it's 7, we don't want to buy them. You know?
Yes, that's right.
What do you think that says about us?
Is that why the sales are down? Is it because no one's letting them go? You know,
Well,
that is part of it, isn't it?
I think there is a part of it. It's a difference between expectation and reality. People are still expecting the old prices and don't want the reality of where it's come down
That's
to.
right.
But I wonder whether those prices coming back to potentially a more realistic level allows new farm purchasers to get in there and buy those first farms.
It will. I mean, there are some very good young fellows out there now that I deal with from day to day, and they've got good equity in what they're doing, and they're good business operators too. They may have to come in as an equity partner. That's obviously, you know, if the capital's too high, but it's capital we're talking about, isn't it, John? Yeah.
If you look at your standard share milking model, you know, if you got your cows at the moment, they're pretty expensive to get cows at the moment, $800, $2,000 for good cows. So the idea of selling off your 1,000 cow herd to buy a smaller 200 cow farm, it's perfectly viable at the moment.
Now, that's an interesting point though. How many people are you actually seeing that once they get to that 1,000 cow farm are happy to go back from, you know, they've been running staff, are then actually happy to go back to that 200 cow farm and get their hands dirty again? Do you think that our expectations as a younger population of farmers have changed? Yeah,
I think once you get into that large scale dairying, it is very hard to go back to smaller, you know, running the thing yourself.
Yeah.
And the reality is, if you stay at it long enough, you can do both. You can be a large scale share milker and have a large scale farmer over time. It just takes a little longer as well.
Yeah.
No, definitely a big change in the attitude. And I mean, you're talking to a guy here who was trying. You know, I started late in the industry, and I had a share milking job, looking to possibly buy a farm, but the age catches up with you sometimes, and the equity's not there. So you've got to sit back and be realistic. And I think being realistic is the key. Yeah.
It's not really something that we're particularly good at, though, is it?
As Kiwis?
Being realistic.
As Kiwis?
It's always allowed us to punch above our weight.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things that I found was that it was actually the Germans who have actually been investing huge amounts of money, particularly into Southland, and yet our focus has always been on China. And I wonder what that says about, I guess, you know, our ideals of who actually we want to have as our business partners.
Look, we're comfortable with European people, aren't we? Because most of us are descended from there. So it's a lot easier. It's easier to sell for the English, Germans, you know, French, Swiss, a lot of Swiss people, Dutch, people like that, who founded a lot of the agricultural industry, Scottish people. It's less of a stretch, isn't it, than Chinese, who we don't really understand their history of farming. We don't understand their what their ideals are, and it's just a bit more difficult for us to get our head around.
Yeah, and the language thing, I suppose, is another thing. I learned French at school, so I can speak French, but I don't know about German. Chinese is difficult, isn't it?
Well, I guess one of the interesting things is whether with these guys coming in with the resources they come in with, because they're not actually cash strapped, they're actually going to improve our agricultural standing overall, because they will be investing in the smart effluent irrigation systems. They'll be investing. So whether that will actually allow us to pick our whole game up, and whether we need to start looking at it as being a positive thing for our economy, as opposed to a negative thing.
I'd support you in that, because the negativity is what's driving us backwards at the moment. We need to be getting on alongside people who've got the entrepreneurial expertise and the clout to do it. And we have the technical expertise. We've got heaps of that here.
Yeah.
Just need to get alongside these guys and make it happen.
Yeah.
Be exciting, wouldn't it?
And I think also capitalising on their business acumen, because these guys are smart, who are coming in investing in our land.
Very much.
Coming up after the break, we're going to ask the two Johns what's grabbed their attention this week. Will it be a rant or will it be a rave? You join us after the break and find out. Welcome back to Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Furrow. It's time now for our weekly rant and rave. And we're starting with John Janssen.
Look, I got a rave this week, Mandy. We've just gone through a process of employing graduates out of for the rural banking graduate position at BNZ, out of Massey and Lincoln universities. And I was just reminded once again what great institutions those are for New Zealand agriculture. You know, the great learning institutions, and we're certainly benefiting from having those grads on board at BNZ. They're joining our team there.
And I have to ask, you know, being a keen Massey grad, obviously the Massey grads were so much better than the Lincoln grads.
No.
Throw a blanket over them, I think. They sort of year about. We probably took more from Massey this year, but that's making up. We've been taking a few more from Lincoln the last few years. So.
You're a keen Lincoln man, aren't you, John Sweeney?
Okay. Yeah.
That's really good because our impression is that we're not getting these young people coming up through, but that differs from what you're saying. There's a lot of talent out there and people are really keen to get into it.
Oh, absolutely, there are into those more professional sort of aspects, and there's a lot of people down there doing science. Yeah, things we were talking about earlier about the psyllid. That's how we're going to solve those problems through people getting trained at these sorts of institutions and going into the research and fields. That's what's going to help us out in that regard.
Yep. Cool. John Sweeney, have you got what have you got for us?
You sparked me up now with this Lincoln business. Well, I've actually got a godson who's graduating this year with a valuation and a degree in farming at Massey, so that's okay. I've put my bit in there.
Oh, yeah.
But our Lincoln days, we were in Wales some years ago and were hosted by the Aberystwyth Agricultural Research Station there. And I've tried through the Gatlins to bring the Welsh people in to we're hosting them down in the Waikato. And I think it's a lovely thing we're doing down there. There's about 400 homes available and about 200 Welshmen coming. So obviously it's like the All Black selection panel itself. We're not getting 6 into 9 doesn't go.
What are you bringing them out for?
The World Cup, of course.
Oh.
And to show them around the Waikato. We've got Doug Emmeads down there. I can rave about that. He's setting up some. I'll do a bit of plug for him, I suppose, while I'm here. Setting up some, tours and that for them to do. People who are agricultural minded, what a great opportunity for them to come down and see a neat part of the of New Zealand.
So is this where I can bring in my rant that no one's found me important enough to give me Rugby World Cup tickets?
Oh,
it's such a shame, I'm obviously not hit celebrity status enough yet. So do you think that, you're bringing the Welsh people in, we're going to get a lot of people come in for the World Cup who are agriculturally orientated. It's kind of seems to have flown a little bit under the radar about agriculturally what we can do. But the Welsh are coming out. What are we going to learn from them?
Yeah, good question.
Has that actually been thought about? Are we looking at it a bit too one-eyed?
Well, I just go, but they were so kind to us over there when we travelled around, a group of us from Lincoln, when they hosted us, gave us beds in their institute, took us to the game that night and showed us around their research station,
This was the Australians' comment on us, wasn't it, that we weren't leveraging the World Cup enough as a business opportunity. And if you look around, it's not obvious that we are leveraging it as much as we possibly could be. And agriculture is a primary example of that. So
what do you think we can do? We've still got time.
It's a busy time of the year, isn't it, I suppose, for farming people, but there's a few of us around that can probably drive it. And we are trying. Yeah.
There you go, BNZ, bit of an opportunity, do you think?
Yeah.
Well, we're running a bit short of time now. We've got a couple of weeks left,
There's a structure in place down there and the response is very weak at the moment.
Right.
BNZ's we've got a number of hosts, people coming across from overseas, and we'll be hosting a number of people at various games around the place. So from BNZ's perspective, I think we're doing a reasonable job.
So you're getting people out on farm and looking at capitalising on what they can bring to New Zealand as well as what New Zealand can give them in terms of agriculture? Yeah,
look, obviously BNZ's more than just agriculture, but there's people that are coming across and interested in that sort of thing. Absolutely, we can organise tours. People are more than happy for people from overseas to have a look around their farms. We have clients come down from NABS Bank, Great Western in America, and they get shown around New Zealand farms quite often.
Yes.
Which is, it's good that sort of thing happens.
Yeah, it does actually worry me when you think about it that agriculture and tourism are our biggest export earners.
Yeah.
And when you look at all the furore that's been caused around the Rugby World Cup, none of it has actually been really positive about let's show these guys
sad, isn't it?
What we can do and encourage them to buy our agricultural products and actually really utilise that.
Look, I think it'll surprise to the upside when the event actually happens. I think there'll be, it'll be a great event for New Zealand, and there'll be people who talk about it for years to come. Have come to New Zealand, had a great time, seen what a great country this is, and they'll be back.
And so, do we have your picks on who's going to win, or is that just a no-brainer?
Oh, no-brainer.
All right, who are they going to play, and what's the points?
Be Australia in the final. We'll win by 12.
Australia in the final?
Yeah, I'd go along with that too, but we'll win by a bit more than that.
Right, right. I mean, well, obviously we're going to be in the final. I'm not so sure it's going to be Australia.
That's all right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
If James O'Connor can keep his nose clean, they might get there.
All right, so here you have it. We've got our rugby picks. So we're going to put these boys up on the board. They'll be on the internet, so you can check out and see whether they win or not. That wraps up our latest edition of Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Borough. And I'd really like to thank my guests, John Sweeney and John Janssen. And thanks to you two also for watching. Remember to check out my blog online at country99tv.co.nz. I love hearing from you, and I'll catch you next week. Keep on smiling.